right after our UFC picker. But that said, speaking of our UFC picker, Mr. Octogon, welcome back into our show. I hope you're having a wonderful Friday. Mr. Octogon, let's start it. How excited are you about this international card that we have on Saturday night?
I could not be more jacked up. Let's make some money this weekend, boys. UFC 290, International Fight Week. I'm pumped up. I'm ready to go. It's been a great week. Tomorrow's going to be even better.
I say this every time we have a UFC event. How are we at UFC 290? Like, isn't that supposed to happen, like, way after I'm dead and gone? Like, I can't believe we're at UFC 290. I feel like these things are just crawling up on us all the time. But that said, this is considered one of the better cards that we've seen over the last few months. So we're going to go fight by fight, look at a bunch of these. I am going to call out a few that I'm really interested in, but if there are things that you guys want to talk about, make sure that you guys write in the comments section what you care about. Let's start with the big-time fight between Alexander Volkanovski and Yair Rodriguez. What do you think, Mr. Octogon?
Well, I think this is pretty cut and dry. I could not be more confident in Alexander Volkanovski taking the victory home tomorrow. Yair Rodriguez is a very talented fighter. He's a great striker. He's very durable. Looking at my stats, he actually hasn't been finished since 2017 when he was knocked out by Frankie Edgar. So, really resilient fighter, but he just doesn't stand a chance this weekend. There's a reason that Alexander Volkanovski is a minus 375 favorite, and that's because he's the number 2 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, and he is most likely to take home the victory tomorrow night.
Now, that's the featherweight class, and Volkanovski 25-2, so he's really been dominant in the division.
Yep, I don't think there's one featherweight in the world that can hold a candle to him. I think the only guy that could beat him is 10 pounds heavier, and that's Islam Makhachev. And if they rematched, I might be putting my money on Volk, to be honest. But as far as plays for tomorrow, I'll tell you that Rodriguez's durability is really standing out to me. And while I don't think that he stands a shot at winning, I think that this fight could go the distance. And Volkanovski is plus 140 for a decision. That sounds a lot better to me than minus 375. So I like Volkanovski by a decision at plus 140.
Also, just want to give out this tip to all those sports bettors at home. I don't bet on UFC. I'm not a big bettor on UFC. But every once in a while, I talk to Mr. Octogon. He convinces me of a play. And when he gives me a favorite that's at that like minus 350, minus 375, I just add it to a leg of a parlay with a lot of plays that I make in baseball or the WNBA on Saturday. So if you guys still love the favorite in that main card, in that main event fight, but you don't like the odds he comes in at, just try to use it as a leg of a parlay, piece it together with maybe 3 or 4 other bets, and see if you can bring those minus 300, minus 350 odds back to even money a little bit more. Now let's move over to the co-main event, flyweight class between Brandon Moreno and Alexander Pantoja. Do I have that right?
You have it exactly right.
Who do you like in that fight?
Once again, I have to go with the favorite on this. Moreno has the heart of a Mexican champion. He has the fighting style of a Mexican champion. He's always coming forward. He's always throwing. And I don't see Pantoja having a shot. Interestingly enough, in 2018, Pantoja actually beat Moreno via decision. But in 2023, Brandon Moreno is a completely different fighter. Coming off winning the only quadrilogy in UFC history against Davison Figueiredo, I just, kind of similar to Volk, I just don't see this going the other way. And our odds are a little better. So I really like Brandon Moreno at minus 205.
Now, is that a parlay that you would make? Is Volk and Moreno kind of pairing those two together?
So, interestingly enough, I already have a parlay for you guys. So, this is a little bit of a spoiler, but I also really like I really like Whitaker in the Coco main. So, if you were to parlay Whitaker, Moreno, and Volkanovski, you're getting plus 138 odds. And that's a bet that I like.
Again, I want you to repeat that because for all of you guys out there who may not be big on UFC betting, or you may have just heard in the interview that our UFC expert, Mr. Octogon, likes the favorite, and maybe you guys kind of checked out because you're like, oh, the favorite at minus 300, poo-poo on that. But Mr. Octogon, hit us with that parlay one more time between the main event and the two co-main events.
Robert Whitaker, Brandon Moreno, and Alexander Volkanovski. If you parlay those three fights with all of them winning, you're going to get plus 138 odds. And that's money you can take home to the bank.
Now, in that Whitaker Duplessis fight, how do you think it finishes?
That's a really good question. I could see Robert Whitaker is sort of a decision machine. He usually goes to decision. So I would say that this fight has a good chance of going distance.
There are two other fights on the card for tomorrow that I just want to talk about with you. Jalen Turner against Dan Hooker in the lightweight division. Any thoughts on that fight?
Yeah, absolutely. So Jalen Turner, number 11 in the world. Dan Hooker, number 12 in the world. Sort of a classic lower contender fight to see who's coming up and who's coming down. I think Dan Hooker is just on the downswing. He's gotten brutally knocked out by Michael Chandler, by Arnold Allen. He got really pieced up by Islam Makhachev, champion. I just think that for a guy like this, I think he's already reached his peak. I think he's on the downswing. And I think Jalen Turner is a young up-and-comer. And I can see this ending by a knockout.
There's a good tip for you guys, is looking at Turner potentially on a knockout against Hooker. I was looking at that fight. I hadn't done a lot of research on the card, but that actually is a fight I saw going the same way. Two guys going in two different directions in their career. Next one I want to... Go ahead.
Exactly. So Turner, for overall victory, is just minus 285. But if you want to take him by a KO, you're getting plus 175.
And again, because of the difference in style, age, everything else, I like it at that plus money to knock him out or to get that mid-fight conclusion. I think that actually is one of the better plays that we've talked about in the card so far, since, as Mr. Octogon has already alluded to, this is a very favorite-heavy card. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but it is something you guys should be aware of just from a betting perspective. The last card on the main event that I wanted to talk about was one that there was a cancellation, so they had to piece together a new fight. Bo Nickel against Val Woodburn. This is a battle of two undefeated fighters. Bo is 4-0. Val is 7-0. Who do you like in this last of the main card events?
Well, I'll tell you this. You could bet the house on Bo Nickel. I do not see him losing this fight. Strength of competition is a huge factor when you're looking at guys' records. And Bo's been fighting UFC competition. Val Woodburn is not. He kind of got pulled on off the street after Trayshawn Gore had to fall out. And I don't see a universe where Bo Nickel loses this fight. Unfortunately, the world agrees with me, and Bo Nickel is minus 1,300.
Yeah, right.
But if you're trying to squeeze some money out of this, Bo Nickel has finished all of his UFC opponents in the first round. If you think that's going to happen again tonight, you can get that at minus 360. However, if you need some plus money and you believe in Bo and you don't necessarily think that he's going to storm out and get another first round finish, for him to win by a stoppage in the second round is plus 650.
Wow.
There's a lot more value in that. So think about sprinkling that in.
The only concern I have about that, and I totally understand why he's so heavily favored, is when they have to do that swap out of an opponent, you always feel like the guy who's standing in is just a cardboard cutout, and so you kind of assume that the guy who is preparing for the fight the whole time is going to win. But I kind of like your idea of, if we're going to chase a good play, if Butt Fumble Sports is looking for the best plays to make, that second round finish is a good play for that card. So a good find from Mr. Octogon here. A couple more questions for you before we let you go. preliminary card. Is there any fight on this prelim card that has your attention?
Not particularly. This is one of those fight nights where it really thins out after the main event.
And the last thing that I'm going to say is there anything around the world of UFC that has your attention? Is there any storylines, just from a macro perspective, that you want to hit on before we end our interview?
What I want to see more than anything is Elon Musk versus Mark Zuckerberg. Who would you take in that fight, Wyatt?
Well, I would take Zuckerberg, not because I actually think that he's the better fighter, but Zuckerberg has been training, like, for mixed martial arts or whatever. And so my whole thing is Elon Musk might be bigger in body, but I do think the training that Zuckerberg has. By the way, I also expect Zuckerberg to be kind of that, like, sneaky good, like, how do I put this? I bet he's like a snake. I bet he's kind of like, he knows how to wrap his limbs around you. He knows how to slip through things. I expect Zuckerberg would probably win. I also think it will be the most overly hyped, least, like, actually entertaining fight of all time. I actually think it would be boring as hell.
I need to see it. I don't know. I love watching a train wreck, and I think that fight would do over 1 million pay-per-view buys.
Oh, easily. No. I understand that this would be the most watched sporting event. By the way, we're putting quotations around sporting event, pretty loose term on that. But I understand that this would be like the most watched, most consumed, most paid for pay-per-view of all time. I also think that it is like a South Park episode come to life, or it is like a celebrity death match from MTV years ago brought to life, in which it's like, I think the cartoonish nature of it is highly entertaining. I actually think the fight value of it will be boring as hell, because let's be honest, do I actually think we're going to get blood in that fight? No. And when I tune into a fight, I kind of want to see some blood. Do I think that Elon Musk will bleed his own blood, or that Zuckerberg? Do I think Musk will make Zuckerberg bleed his own blood? No, I don't think so. So I don't think it's going to be nearly the kind of fight that we hope it would be.
Well, fingers crossed that it happens. Dana White has actually legitimately floated this.
Oh, totally. No. Dana White is a smart businessman, and Dana White knows that, like, this is like Jesus fighting Moses in social media world. Like, this is the ultimate fight of prophets with their own following. By the way, if just the people who love Zuckerberg or hate Zuckerberg, and same thing for Musk, if just those people who have those strong polar end opinions of these people tune in, what is that, like 3 billion people are going to watch this fight? So, like, everyone's got an opinion on these people. Usually it's we want to see these guys bang it out. But that said, we have a couple comments here on TikTok Live. Musk is built like his own cyber truck. Yeah, as in he shatters, as in his glass is breakable. Harley is saying Zuckerberg 100%. I totally agree with that. Zuckerberg has his own personal trainers and dietitians, right? By the way, Elon Musk, I also think at times would be awkward. Like, I don't know if physical touch is necessarily his love language, but Zuckerberg, I definitely look at him and I go, oh, Zuckerberg, he wants to strangle you. I don't know if he's physically capable of it, but ever since Harvard, Zuckerberg loves to, pull a dirty move on somebody. So I think this would be entertaining only from a hype perspective. Once the bell actually rings, I think it would be Boredom City.
Well, anyway it panned out, I want to see it. Take my money right now. I'll put down a deposit.
How about this? Okay, separate thing. If you could put together any fight right now of any two celebrities, who would you want to see fight?
Oh, that's such a good question. Well, out of any two celebrities, I'm trying to think who has beef. I think I'd want to see high-profile athletes, because I'm always curious about, like, what if LeBron James, one of the freakiest freak athletes in the world, stepped in the Octogon? How would those skills translate? So maybe if we put LeBron James versus maybe like a J.J. Watt.
Oof.
I'd like to see that.
By the way, my money on that is on J.J. Watt. But yeah, that actually is a great... Oh, wow. Mr. Octogon just came up with a fight that I'd like to see. J.J. Watt, the Great White Hope, against LeBron James, the King. I'm already hyping it right now. Like, this is made for TV. The guy from Wisconsin and the guy from Akron. Ding, ding, ding. Let's get it. Mr. Octogon, that was a good call. I put you on the spot with that one. You just came up with that organically. Pretty good, man. Pretty good.
People talk about LeBron James and how he's doing the Octagon. I think it's a really interesting question.
Man, you can't go anywhere but end the interview after that. Once you get LeBron James versus J.J. Watt, a brilliant way to end the show or a brilliant way to end the interview. Want to give a big shout out to our Mr. Octogon for joining us. He will join us the week of every UFC fight, or hopefully. So, Mr. Octogon, thank you so much for your picks, and hope you enjoy the fights tonight.